Hi and welcome back. And today we are gonna react or give a little bit of context towards the Nuremberg Trials. But before we do that, please make sure to hit a like and a subscribe, especially on those videos about, sees all of that stuff, because YouTube doesn't like those topics because they're not like as advertisement friendly. So it would help me so much, especially on this video. Thank you so much for that. And now let's go into the video.
His Nazi regime had taken the lives of 6 million Jews. The country's leading representatives were to be held accountable for their actions by an international military tribunal for the first time in world history. Germany in 1945. Hitler was dead. His Nazi regime had taken the lives of 6 million Jews. The country's leading representatives were to be held accountable for their actions by an international military tribunal for the first time in world history. 24 high-ranking Nazis were charged and made to stand trial in the German city of Nuremberg.
Ich glaube nicht, dass in den Begriffen der klassischen Justiz
I don't think you can consider the Holocaust in terms of classical justice at all. In the end, there's no forgiving what happened.
dafür keine Verzeihung, was geschehen ist.
But at least the perpetrators could be tried.
That is absolutely true. And what makes the Holocaust so much, actually, if you just say, genocide, making so much horrors to other human being, right? Colonialism and what the Spanish did and the Portuguese did down in, South America, what the colonizers did in Africa is also horrible on a horrible scale. But it was never this systematic, right? It was never such systematic and such gentle. And I think that makes it to a whole nother level.
Tried in court. How do the victims and the children of the war criminals view the Nuremberg Trials 75 years on?
Is this the chamber? Looks so much different than on the pictures.
My name is Peter Johann Gardosch. In 1944, we were all deported to Auschwitz. My entire family was murdered there. I'm Niklas Frank, the son of Hans Frank, Hitler's deputy in occupied Poland. He was the governor general and politically responsible for every murder committed there between 1939 and 1945.
My name is Renate Röhn. My maiden name is Thoma. My father was the assigned defense counsel for Alfred Rosenberg. Hitler's chief ideologue Alfred Rosenberg and the Führer's deputy in Poland, Hans Frank, were among the leading Nazis who were in the dock in Nuremberg on November 20th, 1945. Many other high-ranking Nazis had gone into hiding, or, like Hitler and his propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels, had committed suicide. The trials were held in Nuremberg, of all places, the city where the Nazi Party had staged its rallies, where the fascists had flexed their muscles.
I mean, one huge Nazi I heard lately could, I think, flee or could stay underground and could, of course, there were many Nazis that didn't get persecuted, right? And that even had later still big roles in the new German government. Which is, of course, a fatal flaw, and there was not enough talk about it because, it was a big shame. Finally, in the 68 movement from the students, this changed then. But I think one big Nazi could even flee to Brazil, but got then caught, I think, a few years later.
Muscles. Now, for the first time in history, a state's rulers were to be held personally responsible for their crimes by an international tribunal. The four wartime Allied powers, the US, the Soviet Union, Britain, and France, had agreed to this even before.
It's so weird, right? That the US and the Soviet Union are on the same team. I mean, of course, literally that is the last time they are on the same team. But it's so weird, right? To hear, yeah, the allied powers, right? The guys that work together, and then you say USA, Soviet Union. You're like, huh? You always think like that can't be true, but it is.
And before the hostilities ceased.
Oh, Bavaria. Bavarian flag, German flag, EU flag.
Might be called an irony of history, Nuremberg's Palace of Justice was left virtually undamaged by the war.
Schwur is like to swear, right? And Gericht means court. So, or yeah. So that is the swear court.
Century. Alfred Thoma, a retired judge, was asked by the American...
By the way, this means basically just, that is the CD. Please hit like and subscribe. It would help me so much. Thank you. Saal is like a big space, often with many chairs in there. So just like, for example, in a theater, you say that's also a Saal. So basically, yeah.
Alfred Thoma, a retired judge, was asked by the Americans to defend Alfred Rosenberg. There were too few lawyers who hadn't been compromised during the Nazi era. Renate Röhn, who was 17 at the time, later accompanied her father to the trial on several occasions. My father was picked up by a jeep. It was the CIA. A few hours later, he returned and said, I've been called on to be the court-appointed defense counsel for two accused who still don't have any defense lawyers. My father was very distressed and said, I had no other choice. I had to accept. For Niklas Frank,
I ask myself, why? Did they push him to do that? Or did he mean I have to accept it because of morals, you know? That would be very interesting.
The trials marked the abrupt end of a carefree childhood. His father, Hans Frank, Hitler's deputy in occupied Poland, was one of the major war criminals. He was called the Butcher of Poland, a fact that didn't escape Niklas, who was just 6 at the time of the trial.
After school, someone taunted me, Minister, Minister, gas canister, because I was the son of a Reich minister. That wasn't so bad. Another said, hey, Nicky, that's what they called me. Your dad's going to hang soon. All I said was, yes.
More than 600 journalists from around the world followed the Nuremberg trials. All you could hear was the translators' machines. For me, it was a tense, oppressive atmosphere that was also charged with shame. The major war criminals were indicted on the following charges: conspiring to commit crimes against peace, planning, initiating, and waging a war of aggression, participating in war crimes, and crimes against humanity.
Bekenne mich im Sinne der Anklage nicht schuldig. Bekenne mich im Sinne der Anklage nicht für schuldig.
All of the accused pleaded not guilty.
I mean, why should you plead guilty, right? Does it have any benefits if you do that? Probably not, right?
Gadosh was just 14 years old when he was sent to Auschwitz in 1944, along with his mother and his little sister. Both of them were killed in the gas chambers. Peter Gadosh survived.
I followed
the proceedings and was gratified to see that at least the main war criminals were put in the dock by the Allies, and that, in the end, they got the punishment they deserved.
During the trials, testimony from witnesses and documents showed that the Jewish victims had been murdered systematically.
All these corpses died of suffocation.
But the major war criminals denied responsibility for the killings.
The accused didn't exactly cover themselves in glory at the Nuremberg trials. They denied responsibility and blamed everything on their superiors. They were just following orders.
I mean, we have literally here the superiors, like the directors board of Nazis. And they just said, yeah, our our supervisors. I mean, of course, there was Adolf Hitler above them, but still, guys, that's not the best excuse.
Orders. They pinned it all on their dead leader, Hitler.
Yeah.
They tried to deny everything. Then, in the trial, they were shown films of the concentration camps with the mountains of corpses. Even Göring was stunned. You could see that. Dr. Thoma for the defendant Rosenberg.
For Alfred Thoma, an avowed opponent of the Nazi regime,
Actually, the guy said not stunned, but nauseous.
who now had to defend a Nazi war criminal, the proceedings were grueling.
Also das war für
It was a real shock for everyone involved, basically all of the lawyers, because they'd never suspected the dimension of the crimes.
Der Verbrechen, doch nicht.
They didn't know the extent of the atrocities committed at Auschwitz, Birkenau, Stutthof, Bergen-Belsen.
Das hat
My father certainly didn't.
Bestimmt nicht.
It was conducted with the sole
Many Germans only learned the full extent of the Nazis' crimes during the trial, including those committed by Niklas Frank's father.
so-called branches of
Okay, a person that was literally like 15 when those trials happened is 95 now. So basically, we don't have many people left. And even 15 is already very young, right? To be fully aware of everything. People didn't want to know. There were rumors, and certainly all of the people, got away and all of that stuff. And I think people told this. But, when you are told something, maybe a little bit, or there are rumors, it's not the same thing as when you actually see it. I think also that many Germans just didn't want to know. They just, as long as it didn't hit them, they just didn't want to know. But I think they knew that something was off, and they even knew maybe a little bit more than just something is off. But certainly not everything.
I have the feeling that he was rightfully charged, because I saw photos of the corpses at the concentration camps, including the bodies of children who were my age at the time. And that shocked me, because it always said underneath them, Poland. I thought Poland belonged to us, the Frank family. My oldest brother Norman saw the photos. He went to our mother and said, "Mom, if the photos are real, Dad doesn't stand a chance."
On October 1st, 1946, the verdicts were announced. Of the accused, 3 were acquitted, 3 received lifetime sentences, and 4 were given prison sentences. 12 were sentenced to death. The executions took place not long afterwards, in the trial court's former gym.
I saw it at the cinema. They showed it there. Not how they were hanged, but them lying in their coffins with the white and black striped rope around their necks.
By the way, tell me, there are like longer documentaries, like 1.5 hours, 2-hour documentaries. Would you like if I watch them? I mean, I would certainly not do this on YouTube because this is just way too long and nobody would watch this. But I could maybe do this something like on Patreon or something. Tell me in the comments if you would like that. Yeah, then maybe I would consider it and would let you know.
Thought they all deserved to wear those neckties.
12 more trials took place at the U.S. Military Tribunal in Nuremberg. Of the 185 additional defendants, 24 were initially sentenced to death.
Ich glaube nicht.
I don't think that we Germans, back then, or even later on, condemned those criminals. The Allies did it for us.
Ich weiß nicht, wie diese
I
Prozesse
don't know how
I mean, today in Germany, whenever you have anybody that has anything to do with Holocaust or something like this, or even with shooting the guys that shoot back down in the GDR, right? Like the people that are running away from GDR. This, even, I think lately there was a 99-year-old guy, you know, that certainly won't, you know, live his sentence to the end if he gets like 10 years or something. We do everything to get those criminals. Of course, most of the Nazi regime are now dead, but yeah, back in the day, not so much.
how those trials would have gone in a German court. After the last of the American-led trials, few attempts were made to capture and prosecute other Nazi war criminals. The world was preoccupied by the Cold War, and Germans once again had the say in their own courtrooms. So many former Nazis remained in positions of authority in the young Federal Republic of Germany.
Yes.
Many of the others who had blood on their hands were never caught. After being led in the direction of democracy by the Allies, the victors who freed us, it would really have been good to clean house and charge everyone. But naturally, people didn't want that.
That is in general like how we see it in Germany now. I mean, he said it. We got freed from the Nazis. Because not every German was a Nazi. Of course not. I mean, there were many people that voted for them, but they didn't, as I said, there were rumors, and you know, if Hitler would have put this on a poster, many Germans would not have said, oh yeah, that is great, we do that. But of course, many Germans were not Nazis, they were just normal people that just, you know, this guy made their lives better. So, still, that is a reason why we felt a little bit freed from them, although at the time, of course, it probably didn't feel that way. But now in hindsight.
Want that, especially those guilty of crimes. They used their connections to prevent that, and then the Supreme Court exonerated all of the judges.
The justice system never really cleaned house. The old judges and department heads were back again and sitting on the constitutional court in Karlsruhe.
That must be so frustrating as a victim or like as a person that was in those camps to see those guys still in charge.
Still, the Nuremberg Trials were a historic milestone, and they later paved the way for the creation of the International Criminal Court in The Hague.
The only positive thing to come out of my father's criminal life was that, due to him, those 4 indictments were invented or found to put people like him on trial.
I find it very, very good. His mentality towards his father. Of course, that he just is not like, yeah, my dad, you know, they did him wrong or something like that. He said, my dad did this, he deserved this. I mean, he's my dad, probably. I don't know if he likes him still or if he finds disgusting what he did or what he let happen or gave chance to happen. But still, I like his attitude towards that.
Nicholas Frank always carries a photo of his father, who was sentenced to death and hanged. Whenever he feels just the tiniest sense of pity for his father, he thinks about the images of Auschwitz.
Okay,
and
that's the answer.
That restores his belief that justice was served at the Nuremberg Trials.
I don't know, is he still alive? Yes, this guy is still alive, 86 years old, and he is an author and a journalist. So actually quite a good thing. I think he probably writes about this stuff, doesn't he? Yes, he writes about this stuff. The father. So I get that this is probably about his father. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Tell me maybe more things in history, Germany, and also why did I say Germany? Germany and also the US have of course a great history. Maybe tell me other little things I should check out. And I hope you're doing well and you keep watching. Until then, keep liking, subscribing, and